All right, hello everybody. Thank you for attending online and in person. My name is Florencia Shapira, and I am a program specialist at the Office of Child Care, the Department of Workforce Services. I manage the high quality school readiness grants, so both the initiative and the expansion. We're here today for the initiative. This meeting is not for the expansion grant. I wanted to make sure you all understood what we're here for. I will be presenting part of the PowerPoint. Is the PowerPoint ready?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I'm just responding to people.
We also have other presenters. We have Emma Monch. She is the representative from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and she is the contract monitor. She will be monitoring your contracts and working with all your programs if you were to be a grantee. We have Tammy Goodwater. She is our brand new person representing the Utah State Board of Education, and she works with the LEAs. I work with the private providers, and we have Sarah Picard. She is our contract analyst from the Department of Workforce Services. She will be answering any questions for the private providers regarding terms and conditions. Okay. The purpose of today's meeting. Okay, let's go. All right, purpose of today's meeting. We're meeting today to help you understand the High Quality School Readiness Initiative, review the grant application process, eligibility, deadlines, and other requirements. The request for grant application is available online today at the DWS website for private providers and at the USB website for local education agencies. So if you are a private provider, you apply through DWS. If you're an LEA, you apply through USB. If you are not sure, your applications will get to the right person. So don't worry, we have in the previous years, some people got confused with the emails, but we'll get them to the right place. So if you are a private provider, you will see that there is other documents on the website, and these are the DWS terms and conditions, scope of work, background check policy, code of conduct, and financial reporting. So make sure you look through those. Sarah is here to answer questions regarding those documents, and we can do that at the end because this is not for the LEAs, this piece. USB has their own terms and conditions. If you apply for this grant before, but you don't have this funding right now, make sure you read through the grant application. Some things have changed. Some things are explained in a more understanding way. That's what we think. We review this application through the summer to make sure that everybody would understand it, and we have lots of applicants this year. Okay, we're going to go on to the purpose of the legislation. The purpose of this legislation is to upgrade existing early childhood education programs, define high quality, improve school readiness and long-term academic outcomes, reduce remediation costs associated with poor academic outcomes, and collect longitudinal data. In other words, the purpose of this legislation is to help existing early childhood education programs to reach high quality as defined in the Utah Code. And you have the link to the Utah Code in the request for grant application. It's quite extensive, but everybody should read it to see what's the intent of this legislation. So it's for existing early childhood programs. This grant is not for expansion of seats. The expansion of seats is under the High Quality School Readiness E, or expansion. And I know it's been confusing, but just remember, this is for an existing early childhood program. And we want to help those children be ready for school. We know that early intervention can significantly help children develop successfully in all areas of development. And therefore, early childhood education in a high-quality program can help mitigate those factors that could place children at risk of poor outcomes. And as I read, another purpose of the legislation is to collect longitudinal data. And why do we want to collect this data? Because by collecting data throughout the school year, we'll know if the money invested is producing the outcomes we want. And of course, if the teaching and program strategies are effective to produce those good outcomes. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Appropriations and Sustainability. I'm going to read both slides and then go back and explain what it means. The Utah School Readiness Initiative funding is for high-quality grants, result-based contracts, independent evaluation of outcomes. The funding is designated for developing structure and processes needed to move toward high quality as defined in the Utah Code. Funding is not designed for ongoing support. Funding is not for expansion. Programs must develop a sustainability plan which ensures maintenance of a high-quality program. Each year, the board will determine the amount appropriated to result-based school readiness contracts and the high-quality school readiness grant program. As I said before, this funding is not for expansion of seats or opening new classrooms, and it is not designed for ongoing support. This funding is to help you fill in the gaps to be a high-quality program. It's to help you find the areas of your program where you need support in a way that could be long-lasting, such as you could fund your professional development, you could fund your coaching, or you can we can help you implement your evidence-based curriculum so you can make sure that children are school ready. If your program, for instance, is already investing in family engagement, you can ask money for this because your program is already investing. But you can ask for money to go above and beyond what you're doing. Remember that this grant is not for supplanting. So if you're already using funds in your program for certain things, we want to make sure we can help you go above and beyond, as I said before. You can help. If you want to bring a speaker to your parent engagement activities, somebody, a professional, you can ask for funding for that. You can, for instance, raise wages to ensure continuity of care and keep all your great teachers in your programs. But you need to make sure that if this grant is going to pay for that portion that your wage is going to raise, you need to make sure that you have a sustainability plan when this funding goes away. Because we don't want to see programs closing because then you can't pay your teachers as much as you were when you were receiving this funding. As data, programs must agree to collect data and also to cooperate with an independent evaluator assigned to collect data for this grant. And for those programs, so I will go on to the data piece again. I'll come back to it. I can just explain you now. So by collecting data, we know that what you're doing is working, right? And most evidence-based curriculums will come with a system designed to collect this data. So the collection of data might vary from program to program. An independent evaluator will also work with you to do pre and post assessments of the children, and that is data that we must collect to see that we are getting the outcomes we want. For those programs that apply for funding during the second and third years, your approved batches could change because Oh, hello? Am I back? Okay. For those, yep, with second, you're not speaking anymore? Okay, maybe I'll get it closer. Okay. All right, so, it's going, okay. So, just for shall I use a different microphone? Okay, I'm going to change microphone, so I'm going to turn this off. Is this one working? Okay. All right, so as I was saying, your second and third years, we expect your budgets to be different because you already use a lot of funding in your first year that you will not need to be using in your second year. Remember that your sustainability plan is very important because we want to see how you are going to be supporting your program when this funding goes away. So I know the sustainability piece is very hard for a lot of programs, but try to see how you will be maintaining that high quality program later on. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Who is eligible to apply? Existing programs serving children who are economically disadvantaged. And those are LEAs, private child care providers, home-based educational technology providers. Applicants must agree to maintain a minimum enrollment of 25% of economically disadvantaged students. Yes, we have a question. Yes.
What we've been doing so far is doing the schools that have that percentage or more.
Okay.
Does it have to be per site? Like, is that going to have to be in that site, or can it be spread across the district? Like, if we have several sites that we want to include in this, and some of them are at like 40%, and some of them are at 21%.
So the question is can with the 25%, does the 25% have to be the entirety of the classrooms, or does it have to be 25% of, so the classrooms combined, or 25% of per classroom? So ideally, it would be great if you could do 25% per classroom, but we know that that's, but it can, for, you know, LEA specifically, it's more than likely that you will have 25% for your entire site, for all of your classrooms combined. But we know that a lot of private providers are already at 80, 90, 100%. So just depends. Yeah. So with the LEAs, it would be 25% average. Yeah.
All right, going to who is eligible to apply. Program must serve primarily, typically developing 3 and 4-year-old children, and it is highly encouraged that programs serve children with disabilities in an inclusive environment. And we'll talk about inclusion at the end of the presentation. Programs must exhibit some elements of high quality to be competitive. All providers must have or willing. I'm sorry, I'm reading my slide right here is missing a piece. All providers must have or willing to obtain a data system with the capacity to collect longitudinal academic outcome data, including special education used by child. Providers must be willing to partner with the Utah State Board of Education to provide each student with a strategic, unique student identifier, or SSID number.
So are there any
There's one more
providers here? Okay. So would you you normally, the ones that are already on HQSR, those that would be applying, do you already assign SSID numbers? Okay, so then Florencia will talk to you a little bit more about how to get those SSID numbers. So.
Okay, and I'm going to finish reading the eligibility, and then I'll go back and explain each piece. Applicants must file one application for each tax identification number. Where there are multiple sites under one tax ID number, applicants must apply for all the sites using a single application and provide how the program will be operated at the different sites and how the money will be distributed between the sites. There is a question, yes. Okay. That's correct. Right. So somebody is asking me if it's saying that the money can be allocated different at the different locations. Yes, because you might need different things at the two different locations.
You would combine that because you're under the same tax ID number. Yeah.
Okay. So let me go back to the beginning of eligibility. And economically disadvantaged in this bill means that the student is eligible for free or reduced lunch. But if any of the private providers, which is not part of the food and nutrition program, you can you can come up with your own procedure to determine eligibility. We want to know what your procedure is. And families qualify if they are under the 185% line of poverty. So if any of you is not part of the food program and you need help determining eligibility, we can help you with that. We can help you find the forms and come up with your procedure.
And something that we'll talk a little bit more about later is we want to make sure that we're finding those economically disadvantaged students, but also another piece to that is the risk factor assessment. And so the more risk factors a child has, the higher the more they're going to struggle. We know that, so there's data that backs that up. So there is a risk assessment factor sheet that we have, and we've adapted it a little, quite a bit since last year, and it's still in draft, but we feel it's a little bit less invasive, and so the parents would, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but the parents will need to write their names if they agree to filling out this form. So they would write their name, and then they would read the risk factors and then say how many. So rather than identifying what the risk factors are, they would just give you a number of how many. Mm-hmm.
So as far as the SSID numbers, you will all contact Kristen Campbell, and we'll provide with that. We'll give you that information once you are a grantee, and you will be assigned. They will be assigning SSID numbers, and so she will give you some guidelines on what and how you collect those children's names, because you have to have a birth certificate. But there is other ways also to prove the right name of the child. We want to follow these children and see the progress that these children make throughout third grade. So that's why we are, one of the requirements is that you work with USBE to provide children with these numbers. Yes, and that's something, you guys don't do that. No, we just give them the SSID numbers, and then we'll follow up with that data. Mm-hmm. Tammy will explain the application components, but before we move on to that, I just wanted to tell you a few things. to keep in mind when you're applying. Remember that when you're writing, you want to refer and use the scoring rubric, and that's posted. This is what readers are comparing your answers to. And use this to write your best answer to somebody that doesn't know anything about your program. After the grant applications are scored, we will have so much funding, and we will determine how many programs we can fund. But after we score them, we will visit those programs, and this is a change from all the other years. We will visit the programs with the highest scores to make sure we give priority to those that do need the funding. And this is something we feel great about, because we want to give the funding out to those programs that do need the help. And there is a piece in the RFGA that says an award is conditional upon availability of funds, an initial classroom observation, completion of an on-site interview, and successful negotiation of the grant agreement. That could include changes in budget. So these awards are conditional until we negotiate all these pieces and until we visit your program. Monitoring of the grantees, as I said before, is done by Emma Munch from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. So Emma is the one who will monitor your contract. She will be the one requesting data and your invoice reporting. She would also be providing coaching and assistance to all grantees to achieve high quality. Remember that if your projects receive funding, what you wrote in your RFGA are your responsibilities and what you will be expected to do. So what you say you will be spending money in needs to be aligned with your gap analysis, or you won't be reimbursed for it. So these are real responsibilities, and make sure if you're a private provider, you also read through all the terms and conditions, scope of work, and finance reporting. Am I missing something? Background check, policy, and all our standards for all our grants. The request for grant application is available online right now. So if you go to our websites, they should be there. So I'm going to pass. Do you have any questions for me? Or we can go on to Emma has something to say first.
So just a reminder that when you're applying, be sure to answer every question, because if you, let's say there's something that you don't do, and you say, well, we don't do that, so I'm not going to address that. Those are points. So be sure to answer those questions, even if you don't have anything in place. We want to be able to see that you're aware that this is part of a piece of quality. So, for example, let's say you don't have a coach in place, or you've got a coach and your coach is part-time, or they're new, or there's something in the skills that's on the grant, on the bill. Let's say you're not applying science into your lesson plans. Address that. Just say, this is something that we're not doing right now, but this is what we hope to do in the future to be able to become high quality. And so just address those things and be honest. Just say, we're not doing that right now, but this is what we plan to do, or, and so just be sure to answer all of the questions. And okay, and I think that's all I have to say. So
yes, so we want to make sure. I'm going to say it again, Emma. That was a great point. We need, when you're writing your narrative, answer every question, like Emma said. And when you don't have something, that will be your gap. That's your gap analysis. That's the main piece of your narrative. What's missing in your program and where you want to be. We can't tell you where you want to be because all programs are different. But we know you all do a great job. and we sometimes what we need is funding, right?
Yeah.
So if we can help you with that, just write it down, say this is what we're missing, and we know we're missing this, and we know that implementing this will help us towards high quality. So now we're going to pass the phone to Tammy.
Someone had a question.
Yes, Estela.
If we are located in a 100% free and reduced lunch school, so these children need to prove also the 180 poverty level in our external
No.
paperwork?
If you have paperwork that says these children are already eligible for free or reduced lunch, no. Yes, because that will be the first thing you do. You use the food program guidelines to qualify the children.
So far, this is working. There we go. Okay, so my name is Tammy Goodwater. I'm an early childhood specialist with the Utah State Board of Education. I primarily oversee the school districts. Emma does the monitoring, but I do, to some extent, like to be involved because I just kind of like to see what's happening out in our schools. If you need resources or you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, even if you're a private provider. I'm always happy to come out and do professional development for you or training or give you extra information about some of the components for high quality because, you know, we're rooting for you. We want you to do well. We want you to succeed. So just keep that in mind. I am going over the application components. The first thing is there is a copy of the application in your handouts. It was the blue folder. There's also a green folder over there. That was for the HQSR meeting this morning if you wanted that information. So I'm in the blue one. And the first part is the application information and assurances. Assurances just means when you sign the contract or you have whoever your director or chief executive officer, who's in charge of signing that, they're basically saying, yes, we know what we have to do to be high quality, and yes, we're willing to do it. So it's just an assurance for us that, you know, that's going to happen. The second thing is the proposal narrative. The basic program information, we want to know, we want a description of your program. Emma and Florencia both spoke to the gap analysis, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. It sounds really scary, but it's actually not. And also strategies for implementation, so how you plan to go about implementing a high-quality program in your program. Also, progress monitoring. How are you going to know if you're doing better? And what are your strengths and weaknesses as you move along in your progress to high quality? And also a sustainability plan. When the funding goes away, how are you going to continue to provide high-quality care to children? There's also a budget and a budget narrative section. And then we also ask for resumes and letters of support. All application forms are fillable, savable PDF documents. It's already up there online. It was up this morning when I checked. And I have to go back and revise it a little bit. There was a couple spaces where it has like an auto thing on it that will fill in for you, but I need to go back and manually add in a couple more fields because they didn't add in. But I'll get that revised. No handwritten applications will be accepted. So you're going to fill that out, save it, and send it via email. And the email address is indicated on the application. It will also appear in the slide presentation later on. Questions about that so far? Okay, moving on. The application narrative is limited to no more than 15 pages using the following standards. So these are the things you want to keep in mind. It's like writing a high school paper, right? So we define the page as 8.5 by 11. We want one side only with 1-inch margins at the top, bottom, and both sides. Double space all the text in the application narrative, including the titles, the headings, any footnotes that you have or quotations, any references, any captions. Double spacing is optional for the text. If you're using like a chart or a table or if you have some figures or graphs, you don't have to double space in there. We would ask for a 12-point font or larger and no smaller than 10 pitch. That's characters per inch. It just makes it easier for us to read it. So we're not, you know, my eyes are getting old, so I need to be able to see it. And then you please use one of the easy-to-read following fonts, Times New Roman or Arial would be great. The page limit does not apply to the cover sheet, the budget section, the narrative budget justification, to the assurances, the resumes or letters of support, but it does apply to all of the application narrative section. So we will not read any pages of the applications that exceed the page limit. Questions about that? Sorry, before I go on. Okay. The application has to conform to the following standards. It has to be in PDF, so it's secure. And it must be submitted in a single email to one of the following addresses. If you're a school district, you're going to send it to the USBE link or email address. And if you are a private provider, you'll send it to DWS. All required documents must be attached. And the name of the applying school district or local education agency, the charter school, private provider, or home-based technology program should appear in the subject line so we know who you are. And then applications submitted after the deadline or without all the required documentation won't be considered. So your cover page should have your program name and address. You'll see that on the application. Program leadership contact information, demographic information, staff credential information, your teacher and child ratios. Do we have a limit on that like we do for HQSR? Is it 1 to 10?
Licensing, depending on
Okay.
private providers, depends on licensing. And, sorry.
Sorry.
So the question was, do we have a limitation on child-to-teacher ratio? And so for LEAs, it's 10 to 1. It's 1 teacher per 10 students. And then for license, it depends on what the guidelines are for licensing. We tend to do 10 to 1.
We tend to do 10 to 1, but it depends on your licensing. However, we highly encourage the 1 to 10 for privates.
Okay. You're also going to determine your program cost per child per month. And I believe there's instructions inside the budget narrative section that will explain to you how to calculate that. Also, we'd like to know the days and hours of the program. So the gap analysis, what you're looking at is looking at what your program's currently doing to address these different components, and one of them is the content areas. And most of you, it looks like, took the Utah State core standards for early childhood, which is great. We wanted to make those available to you in case you needed them. We also had some in Spanish over there, so if you didn't get it or you want it, it's over there. And if you did not get a copy or you need a few more, I can get you some. We're just kind of running limited because we're getting ready to revise them this year. So we have to save them for our committee, but I can give you a couple more. So we're looking at, is your program providing opportunities for oral language, or the communication between you and the child and between child to child, listening comprehension, phonological awareness, which really deals with those letter sounds and words or rhyming or syllables, pre-reading strategies, tracking text, talking about the title of a book, the front cover, the back cover, alphabet and word knowledge, writing, book knowledge and print awareness, numeracy and math, creative arts, science and technology, social studies, health and safety, PE, and then also ongoing focused and intensive professional development for staff. So you have to look, is your program doing all of those things? And if you are, to what extent? Let's say that you're not doing science and technology right now, what are you going to do so that you have, when you get to high quality, or what will you do in science and technology to get yourself to high quality? So you're kind of identifying, okay, we don't really do any science and technology, but what would we like to do? And how are we, and then how are we going to get there to high quality? Does that make sense, or do you need some more explanation? Yes? Okay, just want to make sure. You would indicate the issues that need improvement, and then how you would use the funding to fill your program gaps. So maybe it's instructional methods. Is your instruction for that area intentional? In other words, if it's science and technology, are you just letting kids access iPads and letting them choose whatever they want to do when they get on the iPad? Or do you have a specific program with a specific goal in mind? Like maybe it's ABC Mouse, and today you're working on the letter D this week, so you're having them work on D with ABC Mouse. So it's just hypothetical. And is it differentiated? If you know that you have some kids that don't know the letter D as well as some other kids do, maybe you want to be working with those kids to make sure they understand the letter sound of D and what it looks like and how to write it. Programs, also your ongoing professional development. What do your teachers need? What kind of development do they need? It's not very useful if you're giving them professional development they already know about or that they wouldn't understand. Sometimes it is possible to have professional development that will go over people's heads depending on their education and skill level. but making sure that you're fulfilling their need, asking them what they need and making sure that they're getting it. Pre, mid, and post-student assessments, if you're not doing those right now, how will you do that? What kind of tool are you going to use to see if your students are making growth educationally? You will be required to partner with the independent evaluator. That person is collecting data for the state. We are looking at these outcomes. Part of the reason or actually most of the reason that we do that is we need to take this information back to the legislature and say, hey, we want to keep offering preschool. We want to grow the preschool plan. And right now, to be very honest, the data that we have right now on the outcomes is not very good, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about why that is, or part of the reason why. But the outcomes that we're getting right now are not very good, and it's going to be really hard for us to go to the legislature and make a case for continuing to provide funding for preschool. So that is a concern for us. It's kind of one of our priorities this year because the legislation is meeting in January, and they are looking at, on HQSRE, this is our final year of funding. It's supposed to go away after that. What's going to happen with that, I don't know. Also, are you offering family engagement opportunities? How are you including your parents in the learning that happens at your school? There's lots of resources out there for you for if you need ideas for family engagement. We have some people up here in our second floor that work with turnaround schools. Those are schools that have a high transient population and doing home visits, and that's one thing that would really satisfy that family engagement piece. So if you need help with that, there's resources out there to help you with in helping you to engage your families more and making them feel included in their students' learning. Also, plan to identify children with disabilities. So we put child find in parentheses because we're going to talk more about that later because it has to do with identifying children with disabilities. But we want to identify those students that may need speech or hearing or vision support. And other areas. Usually we don't identify other disabilities, like if they have a processing disorder or dysgraphia or dyspraxia. We don't identify those until they get into elementary school, but there are those kind of basic disabilities that all children have, particularly speech, that they can be identified for. The assurance statements, we talked about this a little bit earlier, signed by a designated administrator. Compliance with all applicable statutes and regulations governing this project, unique student identifier requirement. And just to talk about that a little more, Kristen Campbell is actually an employee of the Utah State Board. She's the only person in the whole state that creates the SSID numbers. So it's a lot for one person if you think about how many kids we have enrolled in schools across the state. Every student, that attends elementary school gets an SSID. Any student that receives special education services gets an SSID, and then students participating in these programs and some of our other programs around the state receive an SSID, and it's for tracking purposes so that we can collect data or, if they start kindergarten here and then they move to this school district, then we know who it is and where they're going. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
So we'll talk more about this. When you receive your grant. We'll do an orientation, but just to give you a heads up now, and some of you that are already with HQSR know this, but making sure that when you are entering in your child's and your student's information, that you are taking that information directly from the birth certificate, because often a child might go by Benjamin, but he might go by Benny, but his real name is Benjamin, or he may go by his middle name, and that's actually his first name is actually Paul. And so if any of that information is different when they move into elementary school, they will then be given a different SSID number, and then their SSID number is lost, and that data is lost too. So.
Yeah, it makes it really hard when we get into duplication. Yes?
So can I plan in my budget for money for children with disabilities?
So the question was, can you apply for money in the budget to help children with disability for this grant? Special ed money funds should cover those disabilities unless you're talking of something else, something specifically. Oh, okay. So you probably would refer your student to a local school district because school districts provide that.
It's at 3 years old. Right now.
Yeah.
Early intervention.
Mhm. If you refer them to your local.
There's no place where to send them. We have two. One dyslexia, he can do anything. So when he was 2, he was in our head start early. So they were paying for one person they paid at 15 only. Now he's going 3 and he's only going out of our program. We don't have we can pay for one person to stay with that child.
You want to talk to that?
I think you can
It takes a little while. There's a delay.
Okay, I think you can propose it in your application. That's mainly what you can do, and then we'll evaluate. It will be evaluated as any other proposal. That's what I would suggest to do.
And also, we have Melissa Bowe, if anybody knows who she is, she moved upstairs to special ed. She's now an early childhood special education specialist. So we can certainly get you some support that way too. So if your district says that they're not going to serve a 3-year-old, that's not in compliance with federal law. So we need to take care of that situation. You should not,
She's in the right.
Yeah, no private provider should have to provide any kind of funding or services for a special education student because that's all provided free through your local school district.
Melissa Bowe, B-O-W-E.
B-O-W-E. And we want to know about those situations because they should not be happening. It's against the law. Okay. We talked already about class size and ratios. For LEAs, 1 to 10 is required. We talked about the licensing regulations. You can follow your licensing regulations. However, programs that are private that commit to a 1 to 10 ratio or better may receive priority consideration. Active recruitment for children who meet the definition of economically disadvantaged. How are you going to recruit those children? How are you going to find them? What are you going to do? Some people put flyers at the district office or at their local school or at the library. So thinking about how you're going to do that. Programs must register and maintain a minimum enrollment of 25% of economically disadvantaged 3- and 4-year-old students throughout the grant funding period and prioritize enrollment for those students. And we talked about how that can be an average, not per site. You'll be providing information and reports and meeting required timelines, maintaining financial records, and ensuring that you're not replacing, that there's no supplanting of existing programs. Independent evaluator access. This year we are asking for 80% of your children that you have parent consent forms. The problem that we're having, and I was speaking to this a while ago when we were talking about those data outcomes, part of the problem that we're having with when we collect that data to present to the legislature is the small sample size. So for example, from one private provider out of a class of 25, we might get 2 kids whose parents say, yes, you can assess my child. How do I know if your program is successful if I'm only assessing 2 of your 25 kids? And if it just happens to be that those are the 2 kids, hypothetically, that were the lowest performing in your class, we're giving that information to the state and saying, this is how well the program's doing. It's not an equal representation. So this year we are requiring that 80%, and we would encourage you to include that. It's going to be a form that the parents will fill out. We are encouraging you to include that in your enrollment application packet to all students and just have them sign it so that they opt in.
So,
delay.
So you would send, once you are accepted into the grant, you would receive the blank forms, and then you would have your parents fill those out, and then you would send them to a man called Mark Innocenti, and to me, and you would send you a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and you would, once you have all those parent consent forms, you would fill out that information of those students. And no.
If you're applying, you are agreeing to do that. then you will have to come up with a process on we want to know how you're going to be doing that. Are you going to designate a specific staff member to be in contact with the people that do the assessments? Is the director going to be part of that? We want to see that in your timeline of activities. We want to know who's doing that, because it's happened in the past that we don't get the consent forms, and we are going after programs and parents, and then we don't have the enough children to sample. So that's why this is a new requirement this year. We want at least 80% of your enrollment to say, to your 3 and 4-year-olds, to say, yes, we want to participate in this. So it's up to you how you're going to approach those families, and make sure you tell them that this is confidential, and this will greatly benefit your program, because we want to get all that data and show good results.
Yeah, so you wouldn't need to send any parent consent or any signatures before until you started the grant. And then, like Florencia was saying, it's really important for you to educate whoever's going to be handing out this application, whether it's someone at the front desk or whether it's teachers, really making sure that they are aware of what it says in the application and being able to condense that down. We do have an English and a Spanish version, but for teachers to be able to condense that information down and help parents to know that the person that's going to be coming out to do the PPVT testing is going to be, that this data will be public, but it's through an SSID number. So there are no names out there, it's a number. So just making sure that right. Exactly,
yes.
Yeah.
So sorry if I confused you on that. Also, when Mark does come out, we are looking at data collection collaboration. He's usually pretty flexible. Is he as flexible as ETID now? Is he?
It's flexible in...
So for when our HQSR evaluator will sometimes meet parents at a later date at a different location.
They come to the school.
Okay, they do come to school.
Yeah.
Okay, so just being willing to cooperate and participate or collaborate with our data collector so that they can get those outcomes that they need. Do you have any questions about that? Okay, it's just really, really important to us, and as you know, why we want the legislature to say, yay, preschool.
In the past 2 years, we've seen 100% for find consent.
Yes.
But we always thought that they just evaluate 50% of that. When we asked if they're going to evaluate more, and they say that no, we just need some.
The children need to meet certain criteria to be assessed. So that's why that's why we want everybody to send as many as you can, no less than 80%, because those children are going to be selected through, there is a selection that goes through the assessment before the children are assessed.
And there's samples too. They're samples, so they're not going to come in and test everyone, but they do a sample. Yeah.
And then making sure that you comply with state and federal requirements for IDEA Child Find. IDEA stands for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Individual Disability Education Act. Making sure that you're just aware of what some of those requirements are. If you have questions about them, again, we're happy to answer that. A lot of that information can be found online. If you go to the USB and look for under special ed, you can get a lot of those requirements there. And then use the risk factors, and Emma's going to talk more about risk factors later on. But it's really just making sure that those kids that really critically need that preschool experience are getting it, that they're being identified.
So since we're on the topic of IDA, Florence is going to read out just the definition so that we're all on the same page.
So I'm going to read the definition that USB provided for inclusion. And inclusion is defined in a way that children with disabilities will participate in and progress in the general education environment with their non-disabled peers. The inclusion of young children with disabilities in educational settings designed primarily for children without disabilities means developing and fostering environments that view them first as children and second as children with special needs. It means understanding that preschool children with disabilities and those without identified disabilities are more alike than different from one another. Inclusive classrooms meet the needs of children with disabilities while still providing opportunities for learning with typically developing peers.
Moving on to the budget and the budget narrative. Applicants must use the budget summary and provide a budget narrative detailing the cost for the improvement plan. The budget should reflect the amount of time and program activities to support a high-quality program. So it should include all years for which the funds are being requested. So in other words, if you're looking at staying on HQSR for 3 years, we want to know how you plan to use that money over 3 years. So you may have different amounts for different years, but we still want to see what is it that you plan to do. Budget expenditure examples include professional development. You can include that as a budget item. Curriculum, you can include that as a budget item. Materials to support the implementation of the curriculum. That could include things like, shopping at Lakeshore for, magnetic letters or different manipulatives, any of those things that will support the implementation of your curriculum. Coaching, if you have coaches or you want to have a coach to mentor your teachers. Tools for assessing children's ongoing growth. What kind of assessment tool are you going to use? Does the curriculum come with assessment? If it doesn't, how are you going to assess them? All purchases must be allowable under local procurement processes, which really just means that you're shopping kind of locally. But most people, I don't know, go to Lakeshore and I don't think you can just shop at Lakeshore. Usually you have to buy it from them and have them ship it to you. But anyway, and you can refer to the allowed, disallowed purchases that is in the grant application. Okay. Yes.
Professional development includes also the CDA support for the teachers.
Florencia, she just asked, does the funding that they would apply for support CDA for teachers, is that still go back to DWS scholarship?
It does support it.
It does?
Yeah.
So they don't have to do the DWS scholarship like they do for HQSRE?
They can.
Okay.
It's your choice if you want to put the money towards it or you want to be part of one of our cohorts through the Care About Child Care offices. It's up to you.
So that way you can use your funding on other things besides making sure your teachers have CDAs. So there's some other opportunities too, and I'm not quite sure of all of them, but I know that there's a couple different routes to CDA where there's a scholarship or a grant or something like that for your teachers. All right. Grant scoring. We look at your basic program information. How well did you answer the description and the role? Did you give us more detail about your program demographics? Did you describe the recruitment process? Did you do the risk factors assessment? And then we'll be looking at what kind of evidence-based curriculum do you use or are you planning to use? What instructional methods you currently use or are planning to use? What your professional development is or will be? What assessments you are using or will be using? If you're willing to partner with the independent evaluator, if you're willing to do data collection and monitoring, how well you incorporate family engagement strategies, how well you're serving children with disabilities in that inclusive setting, and then program staff and qualifications and certifications. Okay.
So I think the important piece of this is making sure that you don't need to be at high quality, and I think this is a grant to help you to get to quality, but there needs to be elements of quality in there because if there's no on lesson planning, if there's no curriculum, if there's no way to collect data, if there's no coaching happening, or if there's no, teacher education, then it's really, a difficult place to start from. So you don't need to be there for every single element, that's where the gap analysis comes from. So just making sure you're addressing those gaps and having those elements of quality, but you don't need to be at that place of quality yet. So
to add on what Emma said, we want to see a good start. We want to have something to work up. We want to see some things in place, but we want you to tell us what you need to get to high quality. And when your narrative is evaluated, you're not evaluated on your ability to write, you are evaluated on the content of what you are trying to tell us. And we will let you know when we are meeting for a scoring, and it is highly encouraged that you are available throughout the day, because it often happens that we will call you if we don't understand something or we need extra information. So make sure you put the person to contact will be available sometime during March or April. We will let you know, and we most likely be calling people. We do it a lot.
Yeah, and that's a huge piece. Like if we have a question about budgeting or your budget narrative, there was one program in particular last year. We thought that they were talking about expansion, so we were going to cut a huge piece of their grant, and so we were able to call that person and get a hold of them, and we realized that the way they'd been writing things was for, it sounded like it was expansion, but it wasn't for expansion. So it's really important to, like Valencia said, be there on the day so that we can ask those questions, because it's very easy. You've got a lot of different people that are scoring, so you have a lot of different minds there, which is a good thing, but something you write could be interpreted in a different way, and we desperately don't want that to happen. We want for you to be able to have the opportunity to be able to receive this grant. So be available, and we can ask you those important questions.
Sorry, we keep going back and forth. And this is just a suggestion. Please don't wait till the last second to send the application. Problems happen, and things don't go through. So it happens many, many times that not all the documents you are submitted got to us. So then the application is incomplete, and it's 5 to 5 in the afternoon where the grant is when it's due. And if we are not able to see that because your application is incomplete, so you have a long time to apply for this grant, and I think it's unique to this grant. Most times there is not that much time. The grant is due March 1st.
3 months
So
from today.
it is a great idea to submit it before the deadline, before that 5 p.m. I have received blank applications before. I had another grant, a request for certification due yesterday, and I received a blank application. So please you have time to prepare and to talk to us if you have any questions. Can they follow up with you to make sure that yes. You can follow up with me for the privates. You can follow up with Tammy for the LEAs, or you can ask any of us if you don't know. We will see where your application is, and it's a great idea to follow up, to email it, and then make a phone call. And that's okay. So you have a lot of time right now to apply.
And I think for USBE, you have a letter of intent for your LEAs.
It's not required. It's optional.
It's optional.
But what's nice about that is, let's say that you think that you're going to apply. All you need to do is send an email and say, hey, this is, Grand School District. We're going to be applying for HQSR. And the reason is, when I get to March 1st, if I don't see the application from you, I can give you a call and say, hey, you said that you were going to apply. I just want to make sure everything is okay. Are you still considering applying today? Yes, we are, or no, I need some help with this. So it kind of helps us help you if we know that you're intending to apply.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. So, but that's another thing. If you start early, you can always ask if you have any questions. We can't obviously give you answers. That's not fair for anyone. But if you have questions, if something's not quite clear in the application, like I said earlier, people interpret things differently. You can always call or email and ask those questions.
Okay, so there is our Q&A form, and it will be on the website. And and it's up there now, okay? And so you can refer to that. We included these questions because most likely they were asked several times, and we know that that's clarifying the requirements for this grant. Just to clarify, only local education agencies are should submit a letter of intent. For the private providers, we don't request it. If I get it, it's okay, but we don't request it. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yes. Okay. And please don't feel like you're bugging any of us if you want to call. I have people who email me 10 times a day because there's something they don't understand, and I'm absolutely okay with that. Don't feel like if you feel like you're not getting answers from Florencia and you need questions, ask me, or vice versa. You're not bugging us. This is our job, and remember we said we want you to do well. We want you to succeed. We want you to get this funding. So we will answer your questions as appropriately and give you information as appropriately as we can without providing too much information. Continuing with the grant scoring, we're also looking at your progress monitoring, your timeline for grant activities, including your staff roles within that timeline, an analysis, monitoring, and adjustment of grant activities. That's something that's in the grant scoring? Okay. And then the sustainability, how you're going to maintain that quality beyond the funding period when that funding goes away. Funding cannot be used to expand new classrooms. That's what HQSRE is for. And for HQSRE, you already have to be deemed high quality. So if everything were to continue as it is now, after you've been on HQSR, you could move hypothetically to HQSRE because you've been deemed high quality, and then you could then increase your enrollment to include more children. You cannot replace current funding with grant funding. You cannot purchase disallowed items or activities. That would include things like capital outlay. I believe that's like property. Any fixed assets you can't purchase, and building projects. I didn't expect it to last or be used more than 1 year. So any playground equipment or furniture, tables, chairs, shelves, etc. An exception to that 1 year rule would be if you need to purchase curriculum. You could do that. So anything that's not going to be used more than a year, or anything that's going to be used more than a year, is not allowable.
So playground.
No playground equipment. Yeah, unfortunately. No furniture. Yeah, unfortunately. Yes. Mhm. Mhm.
Where do we put that on? We can't buy science stuff to put that on. The science stuff. So I'm kind of like confused. If I need to purchase an initiative, do they sit on the floor, or do we need a shelf to put that and sit on?
So I think the HQSR, the reason why the classroom needs to be set up is because those things need to be in place already. So that's why it's not expansion, because we're not paying. I know HQSRE pays for furniture, but it's not an expansion program, so there's pieces that need to already be in place. So furniture would be one thing. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, so like a rotation of materials or something. So if you're buying more manipulatives, now you're just rotating them out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, it cannot be used to attend a one-time professional development workshop or conference. It cannot pay for ongoing program costs that are not supported after the grant funding ends. That could be things like if you subscribe to that Scholastic newsprint thing, those wouldn't count. Well, I guess it could for 1 year, but anything that's ongoing. Provide food for children during instruction, snacks and meals. It is provided under HQSRE, but not under HQSR. Purchase equipment that will be used by administrators. We want all of this to go to kids. So you can purchase equipment that directly supports child instruction. That's allowable, but not any kind of administrative stuff. Am I the next one? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay, is it working? Okay, I'm going to add a piece that I think we missed before because we said who was eligible to apply. I missed a piece that says who's not eligible to apply. Just to be clear, the following preschool programs are not eligible to apply for this grant. Pay for Success participants, applicants receiving HQSR funding, which is the High Quality School Readiness Expansion. If you are receiving funding, you will not be eligible for this. Applicants from private preschool programs receiving funds through the Utah Office of Child Care Preschool Quality Improvement Grant, or applicants having received 3 years of funding through this grant. So these programs are not eligible to, won't be eligible for this funding. So now, Tammy's going to finish.
So additional required support documents, we're looking for resumes of key personnel, letters of support from leadership of the host site, so your principal or your director or whoever that might be, letters of support from additional stakeholders. As described in your plan as appropriate, stakeholders might be your parents, it could be your teachers, it could be your teacher aides, it could be people in your community. It just depends who your stakeholders are. For every program, that's going to look different. And then a memorandum of understanding if that's appropriate. I know for sure LEAs sign MOUs. Do they sign MOUs for private, Florencia? No, okay. And that's why it says as appropriate, because LEAs sign an MOU agreement between USBE and the LEA. It just means this is what we're going to provide, this is what you're going to provide. Everybody agrees, yes, okay, let's do this. And now we're on to risk factor assessment. So do you want this one or do you want that one? Okay.
Okay, so I'm Emma again, and I'm the HQSR grant administrator, so I work actually at the state of Utah in the GOMBI department of the Government of Management and Budget. And so, will you click for me, or is that okay? Can I just do it this way? Okay. So we're just going to take a shift back to the risk factor assessment, and some of you that have been in HQSR for a while, you'll see that this is a little bit different. And so I just wanted to point out that we have simplified it somewhat, and that bottom piece just indicates they just can read through the risk assessments, the risk factors that they have, and just put the number. So before it was kind of set up in a way where they had to kind of circle or mark what the assessments were, and that's very invasive. So I think this will help parents to feel more comfortable about signing these risk factor assessment. And just to let you know that the point of this risk factor assessment, it's great if you're using them to provide services for your families, but the point of them is that you are using these upon registration, so that you are, having your kids who are at high risk enrolled first. So, yes, Stella.
I've got a lot of families that they said, I want to fill it out, but I was here.
Mhm.
Is there any reason that you have to identify?
No. The reason why you would want them to put their name is just so that you can help to support them and to know that that's that child, that you're enrolling the children that are at high risk. If they're not putting their name, then you don't know who the child is, right? So, okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. They don't have to. Mhm. Yeah. Yes. So ideally you want to know who it is, because you want to be able to sign up that child, the person that's getting high risk, the risk factors. But you never, and that was the point I was going to make, is you never make a parent feel as though they have to fill out this form. That's really important that you are letting your parents know. But if you have a parent that would say, yeah, I would love to fill this out, I don't want to put my name, and if I have to put my name, you're not going to get anything, then sure. Yeah. Right. And if you know who that child is, then at least, you can provide services family if they need, extra support. Yep. Good, great question. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about this risk factor assessment? Oh, yes. So if you agree to administer this risk factor assessment, on your application, you will receive 5 additional points. So I would just come and do a quick check and make sure. I wouldn't look at names, but I would just do a quick check when I come to make sure that you're administering the risk factor assessment. But I just wanted to make it clear that that's the point of the assessment. It's not to give it to the students once they have been enrolled and they've been in your root class for a month or two. It's so that you are enrolling those kids that are at a high risk. So you're using it on enrollment, okay? And so application, evaluation, and awards. So LEA and charter schools who are funded with state or federal monies for their current program must apply through USBE, so that would be through TAMI. And then private and home-based technology, private providers would apply through DWS. So, and again, applications are scored by a panel, and there's a lot of us that score. There's around 6 or 7 people that are there, and we, or more, and then we weigh the scores, and if there's a big difference between those scores, then we argue why. So, and and then we have, obviously, we have a score at the end, and then those programs that, like Francis said, those programs that score higher, we will then just come to your program just really to make sure that your class, that you have an existing classroom, you know, because we don't want to find out that this is an expansion, because we can't fund expansion, and to make sure that we're giving money to the people that are programs that are high priority. And then also, if you're already high quality, then we want to be making sure that money is going to programs that need to get to that quality. So
that's the difference this year. That's the difference I was talking about from previous years. And we want to see all those programs that really need the funding. We want to give them priority.
Okay, so the application, evaluation, and awards continued. So applications with scores of 60 or below will not be considered for an award. The highest scoring applications will be recommended by either DWS or the State Board of Education to the School Readiness Board for final approval. And then grants are funded through the Government of Management and Budget, so the GOMBI department. And then it's obviously the funds are dependent on availability. Thank you. And then evaluation and renewal. So grant period ends June 30th, 2019. So it is an option for you to renew for a maximum of 2 years, additional 1-year period. So just reminding you that you can be approved for the 3 years, but you do apply every other year for those other 2 years. So you're going to submit your renewal proposal by March 1st, 2018, and then renewed funding is not guaranteed at the discretion of the board, and it's dependent but not limited to evaluation of renewal proposal. So we want to be sure that programs that are following the expectations of the grant, and if you're not following those expectations, then there could be a chance of not being renewed. And then grantee performance, meeting all grant requirements, and then funding availability. Evaluation and renewal, again, so the board has contracted with an independent evaluator, so this is Mark Innocenti, and his students will collect and analyze the data, determine whether the program has effectively implemented the components of high-quality early education, and report the findings to the School Readiness Board. So Mark Innocenti collects the PPVT data and presents that to the board, and then I will visit your locations, typically monthly, and I will do an observation of your classrooms and usually debrief with you afterwards and then set goals. And those goals will be dependent on around your gap analysis and then any other additional things that I see. And then you will also send a quarterly report to me 3 times during the school year, and that is when you will send a portion of your report will be data, and I will present that data to the board mid-year and the end of the year. So. And again, programs need to commit to submitting 80% of parent consent forms. We're saying that over and over again because we want you to. We need to have that data. So, okay, and here's the application timeline. I'm just going to go through it. I know you can see it, but so December 1st, 2017, the application and scoring rubric is released. So that's today. February 16th, 2018, USBE. You can send the LEAs can send their optional letter of intent, or the private providers can send Florencia a quick email if they want to say, yeah, I'm going to apply, just so that she knows to look out for your applications. March 1st, 2018, applications and renewal submission is due, and that's due at 5 o'clock p.m., and so it has to have that electronic timestamp. And so again, making sure that you're sending those in a day before, just so that if there are any problems, we'll email you and say, hey, your application's blank, and please resend. But if you're sending that at 4:55, you're not going to have a lot of time to be able to make changes. And we have to be fair to other applicants. There's other people other programs that are very interested in, and So we want it to be fair, and that's what the due date is, so a due date and time. So again, late proposals will not be accepted. So, and then April and May, notifications of awards will happen. And so actually, just kind of as a note before that, when we score, it's going to be within that week or two where we come out to your site to check to make sure that you actually have classrooms open. It's going to be right away, yeah. So, and then July 1st, the program, 2018, the program starts, it will start, the program, and then it will end on June 30th, 2019. And so basically, I know that a lot of your programs, sometimes you don't start your programs until August, but you can invoice back in July because you're going to be collecting your materials for your classrooms, getting your supplies, getting all of those things. So, okay. Yeah. July 1st. So you've invoiced. I received your invoice from Becca. So that's gone through to DWS, and so DWS then handle that. It takes a little while. They didn't send an invoice in July. Becca only sent the invoice about 2 weeks ago. So she won't have received it yet. I mean, it's been approved and it's gone through to DWS already. So once I've sent it to DWS, that's their piece. But I can contact Margaret and see what's going on there, but yeah. And if you ever have questions, let me know, and I can always contact the accountant and make sure that she's taking care of it. So she's usually pretty good. Yeah.
She usually takes it in more than 2 weeks.
Mhm. Yeah.
To submit your expenses and reimbursement for that. Right.
Yeah.
The way it doesn't just vote in.
No. So what happens is you'll fill out 2 forms, and those forms will be sent to me, and you'll also send me the receipts. So I make sure that and the time that if you have salaries and benefits happening for your coach, I will look through those things, and then I approve them, and then I sign them, and then I send them on to DWS, and they approve that, and then they will disperse of the money. Yeah. So the money doesn't come directly. I mean, the money is already sent to DWS, if that makes sense. So no, it goes through a couple of different channels. Yeah.
And we need to see all your supporting documentation to reimburse that money. So you get it after you spend it, basically.
And I'm saying, Becca, I'm sorry, you're from Alpine School District, so you're like,
Okay.
I can see your head over there, and I'm like,
So I can speak to that one.
Neighborhood House is sent then. So Sandy will need to send her invoices. I don't think Sandy's sent her invoices yet.
Well, and the other problem with LEAs was our award letters went out late this year because of a change in staffing. So that just happened not that long ago. So that could be also the holdup. Okay, well, thank you for letting me, I'll check with Diane, our finance person, and to make sure that went out, and if she didn't receive it, I will follow up on that. So I'll write myself a note.
And I actually just had a meeting with Duncan, who is from Gombe, from my department, and then also with Diane, who is USB's accountant. And so they have decided that they're going to bill quarterly. So Sandy just needs to invoice, and then I can get that going. Okay?
And I just wanted to add one other thing. When we were talking about child find, it does say on this form that you must evaluate any child that you know or suspect may have a disability. Private providers are not required to do that. If you suspect that a child has a disability, the person that you would talk to is the parent. That's as far as you need to go. So I just want I want to clarify that. That rule is for LEAs, for school districts. School districts are required to report or evaluate any child that they know or suspect. Okay.
Okay. So again, Kristen Campbell is a person that will get you the SSID numbers, and once you are into the grant, we'll go into more detail about that. And then, Sarah, did you want to talk about some things?
Just for the private providers, I just want to remind you that on the second page of the RFGA, there is a list of attachments. So make sure you look at those, because if you are selected for the grant, you will be signing a contract that will have those attachments on there. So make sure you're familiar with those and that you feel okay with that. If you have other grants with us, they're the same attachments you've probably seen 100 times, but just, maybe take a second look at them. And then also, Florencia and I were just discussing that we were thinking about doing another little orientation or another little meeting just for the private providers after this one, just because we've had so many technical difficulties, I think. And I know some of the private providers were online trying to listen, and they're having problems. So we are going to set up a separate meeting in a couple of weeks, probably the week of the 11th, just to do another short little meeting. So if you are here today and you have questions that come up and you want to be involved in that, we'll send information out to you so you can call in. We'll just do it probably through a webinar or something. And then that way we're just giving a little bit more opportunity for people to listen and ask questions. And I think that's it for me.
Does anybody have any other questions? All right, well, thank you everybody for attending, and we hope to see all of your applications.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you didn't get a standards book, I went and got some more, so there's some more over there. If you need some extras, feel free to grab some. Thank you.